Hello everyone and welcome to the first of 66 videos, as these will be a series of overview videos to help everyone who is following along with us in the Bible reading plan. So if you're not, these might still be helpful to you if you're preparing to read one of these books of the Bible. The goal is to provide an overview to walk through the thought process and logic as to why I divided the books the way that I did, at least in the reading plan. Provide background, authorship, things like that to help you better understand the book that you're in. Also, to give you things to look out for, things to remember from book to book, as we're not just reading individual books, so we are doing that, but the Bible is a whole book that is interconnected, that flows together and fits together. And so we need to actually hang on to things that we're reading in Genesis all the way to Revelation, because the things in Genesis are going to matter by the end and all throughout the rest. And as we go, there will be more things that you want to kind of pull out, hang on to, remember in the back of your mind, and then as you read, it will help you understand things that you're reading down the road. So this first video, we're starting with Genesis. This book is the bedrock of the rest of the Bible. It's the foundation. It's where everything else is built off of. And as a result, you're going to want to really pay attention to the narrative of this book. From the beginning, chapter 1, all the way to chapter 50. There are things that you want to remember, to take note of, to store in the back of your mind, going to matter all the way through, again, to the end of the book. Genesis 1 through 3 really sets the stage for everything else in the Bible. And if you're not familiar with those chapters, you need to get familiar with those chapters. Everything else is built upon them and hangs upon them. In Genesis 1, we have the creation of the world. Then Genesis 2, you have a recounting of the back end of the creation, specifically of man and woman. The reason that we have two separate narratives of that, I believe, is because the focus shifts. The initial account is to give you the broader overview, the zoomed out picture of God has made the world 6 days. Seventh he rests, and then places man in the garden to work and keep it. And then Genesis 2 is the lead up and setup for the rest of Genesis, into all the way to Genesis 50, where man and woman rebel against God. And so you get more specifics, you get more details in Genesis 2, because we're now zooming in all of history to focus on God's relationship to man. Lots of other things that happen in the history of the world that are not in the Bible. But from Genesis 1, you have the whole history of the world up to the garden, all in that chapter. Whole history of all creation. And then Genesis 2 onward, we're zooming in on God's relationship with a particular people, culminating in Christ Jesus. So take special note of that as you go. So who wrote Genesis? Let's back up some there. Moses did. So butting up against all of the Old Testament scholarship out there by saying that, but Moses wrote the book, as he wrote the rest of what's called the Pentateuch. So we've been over the structure of the Bible in the Bible study on the Discord before, but as a refresher for those who are new, and I'll try to be uploading some old episodes over the next year that will hopefully help fill in some blanks here. The first 5 books are called the Pentateuch, or into five books, that they really make up a whole cohesive book in many ways. Also called the Torah, or the law. And authorship of these 5 books is attributed to Moses, though there are additions in different places that are clearly from a later date, or the updating of certain names or places so that people understand what they are as they're reading. That was done as well, but the actual substance of the writing, the authorship, belongs to Moses. And presumably Moses received much of Genesis on Mount Sinai. I mean, there's a good reason, I think, to believe that, as he's receiving the law, that he's up there for 40 days and 40 nights. um, so Genesis is part of this Mosaic work. Presumably, people knew of the events of Genesis, though, before Moses. Moses isn't enlightening the whole world as to the creation story. Rather, this was presumably passed down and continue to be passed down. We see even in contemporary with the with Moses, and even before him, we see similar mythologies that seem to be drawing upon Genesis. I would argue they're drawing upon Genesis because, or from events in Genesis, actually tell it the way that it really happened, and then they're filling in the blanks with pagan myths and different things like that. You may have seen connections to the flood, where Noah, and something like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Those things don't refute the Bible, they rather confirm the events, and people interpreting those events according to their worldview, but it's all the same major events there. So as you look at Genesis 1 to 3, that's the pattern that then carries over for the rest of the Bible. You have a warfare setting, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent clashing. You have to remember that because the authors of the books expect you to remember it. They're not going to constantly remind you and beat you over the head and go, oh, hey, this is the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman fighting right here. They don't do that, but it's happening. A great example is going to be later on when we hit the very familiar story, hopefully to many of you, of David and Goliath. David is in the line of promise of the Genesis 3:15 promise that the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent, and that's what he does. He is seed of the woman, Goliath is seed of the serpent, and then he crushes his head with a rock. That's an example. That's a very on the nose example, but it's an example to keep in mind as you're reading that Genesis 1 to 3 is assumed throughout the rest, that you remember it, that you know it, and as well the rest of the book of Genesis, which I will probably make a follow-up video on as we go through the week, but I wanted to just lay the groundwork for the beginning. Being of the beginning, the first line of Genesis is one of the most important in the whole Bible, which is, in the beginning God created. There's so many implications to that statement that there's nothing that's alongside God in eternity past, that God creates all things are contingent and depend upon him for their existence, which means that he has the ultimate authority over them. He has creator rights, so to speak, over everything that he has made. He can do with his creation whatever he pleases, which is a very controversial and unwelcome truth claim in much of our current context. So as you're reading Genesis, keep in mind seed of the serpent, seed of the woman are at warfare. The promise is in mind, and people are looking for the fulfillment of the promise. They're looking for that one seed of the woman who will finally and ultimately undo the curse of the fall, crush the seed of the serpent. And we know as Christians that is ultimately fulfilled in Christ. He bears the curse that was brought about by one tree on a tree, and as he crushes the serpent finally and ultimately and frees us from bondage to the world, our flesh, and the devil. So enjoy Genesis, enjoy the narrative. It is a fast read. You'll be done with it, I think, if you're following our reading plan, a week from today. And try to remember, try to keep in the not even the background of your mind, I think I've said that a few times, but in the forefront of your mind, the major plot points of Genesis. You'll see them repeated, you'll see them brought up later, and they matter a lot for the Exodus, which you'll go into right after you're done with that. I hope this is helpful to you as just not even an overview of the whole book, because you're going to read it, but rather some things to look out for, things to think about, and some information about some of the content. Happy reading, and I hope the Lord blesses you.